Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last week of EPSY 255. In this last week of classes, this lecture, we're going to discuss Chapter 17, which talks about culture and diversity. When we are talking about culture and diversity, to help us understand or to ground us in theory, we're actually going to look at Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. And you know that he has these circles here that are representative of systems. And since we're talking today about culture and diversity, that is actually the macro system. And you can see the macro system is one of the outermost circles, and that represents attitudes and ideologies of the culture. And as you can see, the macro system influences the exosystem, the mesosystem, the microsystem, the individual. The macro system really has a huge influence on children's development and as they get older, how they act and the things that they believe when they are adults too. The macro system or the culture really influences all human beings. So, of course, if we're talking about culture, the first thing that we have to do is define what culture is. And culture is the behavior or beliefs that a particular set of people have. And what's important for you to understand is that in order for certain behaviors or beliefs, in order for those behaviors or beliefs to be considered culture, these specific patterns have to be passed from generation to generation. And obviously, culture can be manifested in several ways, including the parents' beliefs and their values and goals for their children. And as I said, when parents have certain beliefs and values, these goals have to be passed down to their children. And culture also influences the context in which children develop. The context for which children develop. And so what that is saying is that culture creates context or the environment that children develop. So that is why culture is so important, because it has a huge influence on children's development and their context. Ethnocentric is also has something to do with culture. As you can see in this picture here, this woman says, perfect, really. No cuisine is as good as ours. And when she says ours, that means that she's saying her specific culture or her specific culture or her specific upbringing, her family members. She's talking about that in regards to the cuisine. So when she says that, she believes that her cuisine is the best and is a classic example of ethnocentrism. And when people are ethnocentric, usually in all cultures, people usually favor their own culture over other cultures. People may also take it a step further and believe that what happens in their own culture is natural or is correct, and what happens in other people's cultures is unnatural or incorrect. So you have to really understand ethnocentric, understand the basis of it is that you favor your own group over others, but also understand that it can also go to the extreme in regards to prejudice and discrimination. But ethnocentric at the basis is favoring your own group over others. Of course, when we talked about ethnocentrism, we talked about how there are various cultures. And so one of the ways that researchers try to understand various cultures, comparing and contrasting different cultures, is by studying various cultures at the same time. And what that is called is cross-cultural studies. The point of the cross-cultural studies is that researchers are able to compare and contrast what is either similar across cultures or what is different across cultures, and how those universal or similarities or those differences impact children's development. An example of cross-cultural comparison is when researchers study the similarities and differences between individualism and collectivism. When we have individualism, people in individualistic countries usually have their own personal goals, and they prioritize their personal goals over the goals of the community or the family. People that live in individualistic societies also pretty much look out for themselves, and they may look out for like their immediate family, but outside of that, what's most important to them is looking out for themselves. But in the opposite of individualism is collectivism, and collectivism really focuses on community. It focuses on having values that serve the entire group. The group could be the entire family, the group can be the community, the group can be the school, the church, whatever group it is. People that live in collectivist societies have values that emphasize and serve the group. People in collectivist societies also promote interdependence. And interdependence means that they promote leaning on other people in order to solve problems and making sure that, again, they're looking out for everyone. What is your problem is also my problem. That's an example of collectivism. There are some downfalls to living in an individualistic society compared to a collectivist society. For example, people in individualist societies compared to collectivist societies usually have higher divorce rates. They may have higher instances of mental disorders and higher instances of child abuse. Not only do individualistic and collectivistic societies have influences on mental health and drug abuse, but they also have influences on the values that our representative and parents' beliefs. So, for example, in individualistic cultures, parents believe and really value that children have personal choices, that they want to really help foster their child's self-esteem and have motivation, intrinsic motivation, meaning that children should be able to do things because they enjoy doing them. On the flip side, we have the collectivist culture, and in a collectivist culture, parents value connectedness to families and other relationships, and understanding that it is important to respect and obey people around them and also their elders. There are critics of putting there are critics of this idea of there are only two cultures. Critics actually believe that putting in cultures into individualistic or collectivist groups that is too broad and too simplistic, especially since we're in an era of increasing globalization. More cultures are now becoming individualistic, and so people, the critics, believe that these terms are just too broad for us to explain and understand various cultures. Okay, that's it for us talking about the specific cultures and individualist and collectivist cultures. In the next section, we are going to discuss the socioeconomic status and poverty.